everyone. Next up, we have Aave.
Yeah, so basically, today I wanted to kind of like present a bit of like what is Aave and more about like what kind of like network effects you can create in or within the DeFi ecosystem, and kind of like how or maybe even like why those network effects are really important whatever you're building, and maybe Aave could be as a nice example for whatever anyone is doing in the space. Yeah, so in essence, Aave is a money market protocol. So our smart contracts allow to create new money markets, and money market is basically a reserve where you deposit funds for lending out. So whoever deposits funds into the Aave protocol, one of the money markets, basically DAI, USDC, USDT, gets a interest-bearing token that basically increases in balance straight in their wallets. And on the other side, basically there's consumption, which are borrowers who come and basically consume that liquidity against a collateral. And also Aave is a bit of different than previous lending protocols on Ethereum because we have also native flash loans, and basically that is something what kind of like continues the narrative of not just like trying to lock a lot of collateral value or so-called like total value lock into the smart contracts, but also trying to reutilize that value by with the flash loans and in the whole DeFi ecosystem. And Aave has interesting history. We built the first lending protocol on Ethereum called ETHLend, and we have been since a few years now building DeFi. So it has been a very interesting journey. So one of the money markets that we have, like our main money market, is currently in the size of 82 million, and for us, market size is basically the deposited amount and basically and the borrowed amount. So it's not just only the value locked, but it also includes the borrowing market. So that's very interesting too. Interesting difference with the compared to the total locked value. And we started Aave, we launched on Mainnet on January this year. So this has been accomplished within 6-month period. So we're pretty happy how far we and like how quickly we got this kind of like traction. We also kind of see the protocol as not just like, we don't believe that there will be like one big money market where or one big lending protocol where basically all the important assets will be listed, and that will be the kind of like a main pool that will be adopted. We more believe in the future that there will be multiple money markets with their particular assets and use cases and categories, kind of mimicking what we have in the lending space in the traditional finance. And since then, a couple of weeks ago, well, actually a week ago, we launched our newest money market, the Uniswap liquidity provider money market, which allows users to deposit their Uniswap liquidity provider tokens and basically borrow stable coins or ETH against them. And later we're introducing also basically borrowing those LP shares. And this is currently run on the version 1 Uniswap assets that we're supporting, but we're going to support Uniswap version 2 as well. And what's interesting here is kind of like we are pretty much like creating different kinds of risk profiles. So the assets that we have here, the Uniswap liquidity provider tokens, they're pretty much the same as our main pool, basically the bigger pool, but it introduces a bit of more of derivative risk. And it's interesting to see like what will be in the future, the difference between the interest rates between the main pool and the Uniswap pool. So that's pretty cool stuff. Now, yeah, so the growth has been pretty awesome, like past months, and kind of like what I wanted to talk about today is like how did we achieve this network effects, and what brought us into this space from kind of like from zero in January. And one of the kind of like important stuff is that when you build something, you always need to focus on your users and why they're actually using your protocol. So that's something that we had a lot of attention for, and that's why like the volumes have been growing over the time. And also kind of like there's other things related to composability and also like the different protocols utilizing and hacking and building further what we have as a base protocol. So in terms of the users, like we have different kinds of users that are depositing or borrowing from the protocol. So someone just want to earn interest on their DAI holdings. Some have negative interest rates on their bank accounts in traditional finance, and they're coming into DeFi because of the interest rates that you can get from stable coins. There is access arguments that you can access this kind of a market 24/7 compared to what you cannot do might not do in traditional finance, and of course like the ability to leverage on your cryptocurrency holdings is very big thing. So when you need that instant liquidity, and then you have the kind of like a protocols or integrators or projects that are building on top and generating that volume and seeing Aave as a kind of like them as a solution what they basically need. And Blazar is a good example, which was a hackathon project in ETH London, and basically they created a fixed deposits rates and also kind of like advancing those deposits. So that was pretty interesting stuff. And of course, like I mean, part of the network effects are memes, and without a doubt, that has been like very important part of what we're doing. So everyone kind of like has their own reasons in terms of like why they're using our products. So this is like the very first thing, like what has been important to us, like why our users are using us and getting as much feedback as possible, why our community is following us and trying to implement things, and like focusing on your user has been something that is been very rewarding for us. And one of the interesting stuff is like how the network effects work because of like the composability and so forth. And people like when you have a situation when anyone can build anything basically from whatever part of the world and build basically new financial primitives, that's really, really powerful and something that's has been like not that accessible in the past. So what's funny actually is that I brainstormed with Mariano Conti from MakerDAO about flash loans previously a couple of months ago, and there was a case where basically if you opened a one vault, let's say you have WBTC vault or USDC vault, and basically you want to change your vault exposure. Let's say you want to sell your BAT, which is in a MakerDAO vault, and you want to basically open a vault with a ETH inside of it, and basically without returning your DAI borrowings, which you might already have spent or they're basically reinvested into something. So what's interesting here is that in the MakerDAO system, you couldn't basically swap your vault natively. So usually like the baseline protocols are very limited because you need to build things very diligently and not that too many features. And what was interesting that we noticed that actually you could use flash loans to swap your collateral vault. And I asked in Twitter, like, is there anyone that actually want to build this thing? Because I will definitely use it. And what happened is that David basically came and said that, okay, I will try to build this thing. And eventually, like, it took him a few days. And he basically built collateral swap. So it's collateralswap.com, and you can basically swap from ETH to BAT and BAT to ETH. So that was basically kind of like a POC on this event, and like that was pretty interesting. Like how people like really were interested in this kind of like a functionality. And then actually another person saw this thing in Twitter, Fiona, which is basically not a developer but more of a DeFi user. She basically went there and did a collateral swap and explained how she did it, and basically that effect went on and on. So that's like a very cool thing, like how the small things matter. And David is today basically working at Aave and building the current protocol and expanding it with our team. So it has been pretty good way also of hiring people, and that's pretty cool stuff. And part of this composability as a network effect is really just like kind of like vacuuming and providing value to the whole ecosystem and getting basically more value into other projects. So there's in the whole Aave, we call it like Aave family, because there's so many projects that we are actually very close together. So we work in many levels, and basically it might be an integration into my Ether wallet, so that users can deposit straight to Aave, or it might be, for example, 1inch that uses Aave in the background. For example, Curve.fi, they basically provide stablecoin swaps and share trading fees with their users, and on the background they basically deposit into Aave to get those lending yields as well. So that's kind of like yield hacking there. And there's a bunch of other, so many cool things out there that basically utilizes us. And that's just like how the network effect works in this space. So that's like, I think that these are the reasons like how we basically became our protocol grew so fast. Yeah, and of course the flash loans implementation is one of the coolest things that we have. And what actually happened is, like in the beginning we didn't have that many flash loans, and what we tried to do is we tried to get more people to build cool things. Like the collateral swap is a good example of a flash loan functionality. So what happens there is that if you have the BAT wallet open on MakerDAO and you spend your DAI, you can basically take a flash loan from Aave and in DAI and close your BAT CDP, sell that BAT in Kyber, for example, for ETH, and putting that ETH back to MakerDAO and opening a new wallet with DAI and sending that DAI back to Aave to repay the flash loan. So you can do this kind of functionality. So what happened is that basically when the Black Thursday happened, like the flash loan volume spiked quite a lot. So that's the first kind of like a spike in this graph. And basically what happened is that DeFi Saver basically implemented the flash loan functionality, and basically they saved over 2 million worth of wallets during the Black Thursday and mitigated the zero auction bit damage. So that was pretty cool. And since then, like the flash loan has been like growing and growing. And recently, like DeFi Saver has had they basically made a new DeFi primitive where you can actually pre-leverage your vault by taking a flash loan. So basically you can open a vault with 1.88x or so forth. So that basically grew the volume even further, and those flash loans are pretty big, like 500,000 and whatnot. So that's totally super cool thing. So it just shows like how one project can actually bring a lot of volume and just a lot of exposure, and also like how imbalanced it is and how much you actually need everyone in your ecosystem. And of course, like the launch of a new money market with the Uniswap assets has definitely got like a lot of attention, and I think people have been impressed. I mean, within the DeFi ecosystem, that kind of like creating new markets is the way to go for us. It's not probably the way to build things in other protocols, but that's like what we really think is a right thing to do. Yeah, and I think it's innovation. I mean, trying to innovate on every iteration that you build, and once you get like that amount of assets in your protocol, the development process slows down because you need to be more diligent and put more effort into security. So that's something that you need to really be mindful of. And yeah, and one of the things we're implementing, because we are having multiple money markets and they are just coming, we are implementing governance features. So basically we will have our native token lend as a governance mechanism where basically there is a first line of defense where the token holders can stake into the protocol, and basically, in case of an insurance event, and avoid the minting scenario that basically happens similarly in the MakerDAO system. And if there is not enough stake, what happens is that there's the actual minting auction, and also built-in backstop module, which basically buys everything that's minted or staked to the extent that there is the backstop liquidity. And the important thing here is the incentives. So the stakers and the backstop module are incentivized as the protocol grows and the risk grows to basically stake, and both to the backstop module and the stake module. So there's kind of interesting network mechanics here. And there's basically the incentives are financed with the small issuance and also protocol fee sharing. The very next thing that we are implementing is set money market, which basically means that if you have a token set, so basically you have some kind of exposure, you basically can use that as a collateral or lend it out in your lend it out in Aave. So that's pretty nice. So basically, if you have ETH link exposure or ETH USDC or whatever is your strategy, you can basically use that as a collateral, unlock capital for other things. For example, providing liquidity into Balancer, Uniswap, and so forth. So it's kind of like a very, very DeFi today is very into composability and yield hacking, and I think it's something that is growing. And of course, as protocols grow, security is the very important stuff. And here, basically, the professionals behind Aave, it's 17 individuals are working from London and Switzerland and a bit of globally. And we're also known as the Avengers or Aave engineers. And if you want to know more, there's Telegram that you can actually join, or our Discord, aave.com/Discord. And yeah, if you have any kind of questions, I'm super happy to answer. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really cool seeing the various layers of composability and everything you guys are doing in the broader DeFi ecosystem, as well as those fantastic memes you guys got. So yeah, to start off with the Q&A, looks like we got a couple great questions. So for the first one, so what's the value capture mechanism behind the Lend token?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So basically, currently what we have is pretty much a token burning function. But we think the more bigger value capture is actually allowing the token holders to basically protect the protocol. So the more secure protocol we have, and as the protocol is growing, the risk is also growing, and the more we can secure it, the more adoption we can actually have. And the interesting part is that the base mechanism there is that kind of a similar of MakerDAO system where if there is a so-called insurance event, there will be basically minting. But instead of kind of going straight to the minting functionality, there's the staking functionality where the Lend token holders are actually staking into a pool, and that pool is kind of like the insurance pool. And if there's this kind of similar insurance event, that pool gets slashed and without going into minting. And then we have the backstop module, which is built in, and it has its own governance as well, which basically buys anything that floats out from the slashing or from the minting of the Lend token to the extent that there is. And the idea is that to protect the protocol, you need incentives. And as the protocol grows and becomes riskier, the incentives align to basically incentivize more token holders to stake into the protocol and take that additional risk. And basically that is financed, the incentives are financed with small issuance and also from the protocol fee sharing. And the amount of kind of what's interesting here is that the Lend token holders, they also govern all the monetary policies, including the staking mechanisms and also the actual rules. So what kind of pools can be created, money markets, for example, what kind of assets can be added, and kind of control the risk there. So it will be interesting balance between adoption and the risk. And as time goes past, basically the issuances become smaller, and the idea is that basically the fee sharing becomes more larger as there's more adoption and more money markets that has been incepted on the protocol. So that's like the kind of like a main functionality that the Lend token has.
Mm-hmm.
In the coming, we are basically going to publish Aavenomics, which is the kind of like tokenomics paper of Aave very soon, within a few weeks. So there's kind of like a detailed overview of this so-called master plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess with a follow-up, so specifically, so when you say protocol fee sharing, that's interest rates that borrowers are paying that are then part of it is being distributed to the lend holders, right?
Yeah, so basically it's kind of like borrowers are usually always paying whatever like functionality it is, and whatever is the fee thing. There's always like the consumption side always handles the payment of the consumption of the liquidity, and ends up paying the fees. But also we don't have only the kind of fees on the normal lending, but we have also fees on the flash loans. So what's the coolest part is that, for example, if something happens between MakerDAO or another protocol, for example, Compound, and let's say there's a flash loan refinancing a loan from MakerDAO Vault to Compound USDC. So there's like an interest rate swap, currency swap, and even like a collateral swap. What happens is that flash loan generates fees into the Aave protocol. And same if DeFi saver is used, or any other kind of like integrator part of the Aave family is using the flash loans, or well, basically flash loans, I would say, because it's a good example of something happening in other protocols. Basically, those fees are coming into Aave. So that's like the interesting part. And of course, like the liquidation mechanism is something that we're changing, that the protocol can itself liquidate by someone basically calling the liquidation function, for example, with a bot mechanism, and most of the liquidation fees goes back to the protocol. So kind of like taking more of the profits from liquidators to the protocol, and incentivize keeping the funds in the protocol.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying. So going off, so you mentioned flash loans, and those have been a really interesting building block that we've seen used throughout DeFi for various use cases. But it on the flip side of that, right, it also enables people who are looking to hack, or I guess exploit other protocols, because it effectively lowers the cost of capital. If you want to mess with like automated market maker protocols or other lending. So how do you kind of like reconcile that in that, right? It creates these like great use cases, but also potentially like represents a threat to other protocols. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think well, firstly, it's basically flash loan. Anything that you can do in flash loan, you can do like without the same attack. You just need the same amount of funds. But of course, like what it allows basically to do is that you basically have not just like whales with money, but nerds with a lot of money and kind of like accessibility. So that really brings more kind of like a new trials of attacks. But I think like what's important is that the protocols are resilient to any kind of these attacks, whether it's a whale or whether it's just basically a young person hacking from somewhere in the world by just flash loans. So I think protocols need to be resilient. They basically need to really slow down what they're building. So for example, when we are creating a new money market at Aave, we are basically using the same infrastructure that we have in the main market. And basically, we're just adding one additional function, which is component, which is basically the price feed provider of the new assets, and we focus on that particular component to make it sure it's secure. So that's like very important stuff. So I think in terms of like the flash loans attack we had, I think the ecosystem didn't just see it kind of like that there will be this kind of like attacks coming and liquidity, even though like any whale could possess that liquidity. So I think stuff just needs to be more resilient when we put into mainnet, and that's like the key thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense, because I guess it doesn't really allow for attacks that wouldn't have been able to happen otherwise. Just makes it easier for those that don't have the capital, but it's a threat that you have to think about regardless anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah, with that, we got to wrap up out of time here, but thank you again so much. This was an awesome presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack.